What's up? Welcome to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of May December, the new drama film from Todd Haynes, out now on Netflix, starring Julianne Moore, Natalie Portman, and Charles Melton. May December premiered back at Cannes earlier this year, got scooped up by Netflix, and is certainly in the Oscars mix, I would say. And I think a big part of that, and part of the reason Netflix wanted to get involved, this is a very, I think, juicy subject. And of course, with a talented filmmaker of the caliber of Todd Haynes, his first movie since 2019's Dark Waters. Obviously, a lot to like. Talented cast, obviously, at the front as well. And yeah, I think this premise is definitely something you just got to wrap your head around right away, where it's basically inspired by the story of Mary Kay Letourneau, where Julianne Moore's character Gracie, she in the past before the movie takes place, Gracie had, as a married woman, had an illicit affair with Charles Melton's character Joe when Joe had just completed the 7th grade. Obviously a crime. Gracie, in since, goes to jail, but then after she leaves prison, Gracie and Joe have a relationship together and have a new family, have kids, and we're at the place now at the story where Gracie and Joe's youngest kids are about to graduate high school, and despite the fact that Joe is only in his mid 30s, and Natalie Portman's character Elizabeth is a pretty well known actor who is going to be playing the role of Gracie in an independent film, and she is coming down to Savannah to meet Gracie and meet the family as a form of observation and study and learning and preparation for the role. Obviously, there's a lot to chew on with something so seedy as like the central conceit of the story, but also kind of equally seedy is the fact that someone would want to get so close to do this kind of study for almost like methody acting, right? Daniel Day-Lewis would certainly be interested in an approach to this degree, right? And in the movie, it's an interesting movie where like I appreciate the strength of the acting performances, but ultimately the way this script works, the way this story is told, it's more minimalist. It's more I think it's steady. Even though Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman are definitely kind of going for it. Like Julianne Moore, her character has a lisp when there's a crying scene where she really strongly tears up and sobs, as we know she can. Julianne Moore definitely doing her thing, and she's really tremendous in the movie. And Portman, I think, does a good job as well. This is right at home with kind of a lot of the roles she's been taking the past 10 plus years of her career. This is kind of the darker things she's tended to do with stuff like Vox Lux and Jackie, and even way back to Black Swan at this point. Like, this is in Natalie Portman's role. And then you have Charles Melton, who's been the big breakthrough with this movie. Melton is being heralded as someone in the Best Supporting Actor mix at the Oscars. Of course, Charles Melton, famous from Riverdale. I had not seen him in Riverdale. I didn't watch Riverdale, so this is my first time seeing him. I definitely think he's strong, but it's a bit of a reserved, steady performance that only has a brief, real scene or scene and a half of showiness, and this is not really what this movie is about. So I think it's a hard movie to truly put your arms around, but it's a story, it's a world to be in the middle of that definitely will leave you thinking about it after you've watched the movie. So it's certainly interesting. It's certainly unique, even if I wasn't completely on board with everything about it. And yeah, I think ultimately, like the way the movie is structured, where really it's just Elizabeth kind of meeting the family and then meeting acquaintances and people in the community and stuff, and just asking questions, basically a series of informal interviews as she's just trying to learn things. But you start, I think what's interesting about May December as well is you have that structure, right? But then the movie kind of like shifts you as the audience, like your feelings on like who you are rooting for, or like what you think about what's going on. Like the tone kind of like varies and ebbs and flows. And like there's a moment where Elizabeth goes to the pet store where Gracie and Joe were caught all those years ago, copulating. and she goes to the storeroom where they got the back storeroom where they got caught in the store, and kind of like lays down and like puts herself in the scene and like pretending she's like in the throes of it. It's like, huh, like what's going on with this character, right? Like how like you start to feel that she's being more manipulative. She gets invited to one of Gracie and Joe's kids' high school acting class, and she gets asked kind of like a crude, immature question from one of the boys in the class about filming sex scenes, and she takes that as an opportunity to like talk about when the line gets bridged, and like you can tell that she's putting on a performance and kind of um, having fun with how she's carrying herself in this situation. Meanwhile, like you can tell Gracie is completely sociopathic, like the way she manipulates and micromanages her children, but also, as it's quickly revealed and you spend more time with it, what she's done to Joe. Obviously, from the very beginning, you understand that like Joe was in a situation where he was not able to consent, legally, of course, and then furthermore, it's like quite revealed that he is a victim not just for that criminal aspect, but also to the fact that he is very emotionally stunted by this whole situation, and like the decision making, the agency was taken away from him in a huge aspect of his life. And when you spend time with Charles Melton's portrayal of Joe, you feel like you're spending time with like a adolescent person who happens to be like 35, and it's kind of sad. And like you have this moment which I think is like really important in the movie where Elizabeth and Joe like hook up real quick and fuck, and Elizabeth's just like, this is what grown-ups do. It's like an amazing line, but Joe just like cannot wrap his head around things because he just doesn't know so many aspects of, I think, controlling your life, and there's this kind of motif through the beginning and end of the movie where Joe takes care of monarch butterflies as like a form of like amateur conservationism, basically. And you could kind of see the metaphor plainly where Joe, he's still the larva, right? He never got to blossom and fly away because of what Gracie did to him, despite Gracie's protestations that it was Joe who wanted it and it was Joe who seduced her, and all these kind of wild things to say so many years after the past. And yeah, I think a lot of those interview scenes are quite interesting. Like, yeah, there's one where we spend time with one of Gracie's older kids from her original marriage, Corey Michael Smith's character Georgie. Georgie makes I think a really strong impression in basically two scenes as well. Definitely kind of leapt off the screen for me. And yeah, I think just it's weird though, because Elizabeth being like the audience avatar in a sense, even though she clearly has this pretty self-centered agenda for what she's doing and kind of poking at open wounds in the community, in the family, for her own gain for the most part. It's interesting. And I think Melton, the scene he has when he hooks up with Portman, directly into the confrontation that Joe and Gracie have, where Melton, I think that's where he gets to be his most emotional, his most expressive, even though Joe really has a hard time communicating things like this because he just doesn't know it any other way. But it's so unsettling watching him, kind of come to the realization of what's happened to him, really perhaps for the first time. And yeah, there's no like fine answers to this movie. There's some humorous aspects as well, I think, with the line readings, although I didn't really laugh at some of the stuff others have found funny just because the premise is just kind of unsettling and tense the entire time. That, yeah, it's a layered movie for sure, interesting. I think Melton's good in the movie. I'm not quite as wrapped up in the performance as others are. Like, we know Robert Downey Jr. is going to walk away with this Oscar for Oppenheimer, of course, but it sounds like his nomination's getting increasingly safer anyway. Same thing with Julianne Moore, Best Actress, interestingly enough. Moore, of course, an Oscar darling, as we know. So, yeah, I think this is it's a worthy and unique movie. Definitely worth seeing. Todd Haynes has a point of view for sure. I think the way the score drops in the beginning of the movie with the piano keys definitely got my attention as well. Also, I just want to shout out Elizabeth Yu, who plays one of Gracie and Joe's kids who's about to graduate. She'll be playing Azula in Avatar The Last Airbender live action series for Netflix next year. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of her, assumingly with more lines and more things to do. But she seemed actually pretty solid. In a very, very small role in May December. But yeah, interesting film. Overall, I think it's a good movie, even if it's a bit hard to completely wrap your arms all the way around. But I also think it's a movie that probably has a lot of things to interpret and think about and fixate on, depending on the viewer, which also is, I think, the signs of something interesting at the very least. So yeah, let me know, how did you feel about Netflix and Todd Haynes' May December? What was your favorite aspect about it? Are you on the Charles Melton Oscar train? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.